welcome to the spring break video. Today we're going to discuss how plants get water from the soil all the way up to their leaves so that their leaves can use the water to do photosynthesis. Now, if you remember, water is required for photosynthesis because during the light reactions of photosynthesis, water is split and the electrons are used to replace the electrons that were excited in chlorophyll. Eventually, again, this is a big picture thing, those electrons that are in water eventually end up being the electrons that are in glucose that the plant makes in the Calvin cycle. But today's focus is to explain how the structure of the plant helps carry water against gravity, it's going up against gravity, all the way from the roots to the leaves, which in very, very large trees can be a very, very huge distance. So, plants have to transport a lot of things. Remember, to do photosynthesis, they need water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. The main two things that need to be transported into the plant are water and carbon dioxide. Water, which is the focus of this lesson, is transported in the xylem. And we're going to learn about this process, which this whole lesson is really about, called transpiration, which helps water travel to the roots in the xylem and get pulled up into the leaves. And we're going to talk a lot about this, what this whole entire lesson is about. Plants also need to get carbon dioxide to do photosynthesis. Remember, carbon dioxide is needed in the Calvin cycle. And carbon dioxide is taken in through the holes in the plant called the stomata. Similarly, for us, our purposes, we need it. When plants produce excess oxygen, it's transported out of the plant through the stomata as well. A little bit at the end of this lesson, we're going to talk about how the stomata open and close, and what environmental signals they respond to. Last but not least, we're not going to spend much time on this. Once the plant makes sugar through photosynthesis, it needs to be transported throughout the entire plant. And the tube, which runs almost like anti-parallel to the xylem, it's called phloem. And the job of the phloem is to travel, is to take sugar and give it to the rest of the parts of the plant. So to sort of outline this lesson, the first part is going to focus on how water travels from the roots to the leaves, using a process known as transpiration. And then the second part of the lesson is going to focus on the stomata and how the stomata open and close and what signals they respond to. Aha! So we have our good friend water, which we reviewed, I think it was a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And if you see, we have one water molecule here, and one water molecule here, and because of the polar covalent bonding, oxygen is partially negatively charged, because it has more of the electrons, and hydrogen is partially positive charged, because it's holding less of the electrons, because it has a lower electronegativity. Because of this charge difference, the oxygen on one molecule and the hydrogen on another water molecule can what they call hydrogen bond. And remember, hydrogen bonding is not like a covalent bond. It is simply a force of attraction between a very electronegative element, in this case oxygen, and then hydrogen, which has to be attached to a very electronegative element. But it's a strong, extremely strong force, not a bond. We're going to talk about how the structure of water helps plants fight gravity. This picture here is showing cohesion, when one water molecule sticks to another water molecule through hydrogen bonding. To understand how water gets from the roots of the soil to the stems, we also need to review water potential. And many of you said on the practice AP exam that we took over the spring break that we need to review water potential. We're going to review it briefly here, and then Tuesday in the cell review we're going to go over it in more detail. So, the water potential, which is the equation here, is used to predict the way water will move, usually in plants. Now, water potential, this is the symbol for water potential, psi, is equal to the solute potential plus the pressure potential. The solute potential is given by the equation negative I CRT. I is the number of particles the solute breaks up into. Usually it's 1 if it's covalent, if it's sugar. And it's the... My phone is ringing. We have to pause. Alas, no one important. So the solute potential, we talked about I. If it's ionic, it's the number of particles it would break up into. So if it was sodium chloride, NaCl, sodium chloride will dissociate into a sodium ion and a chlorine ion, so the I would be 2. But for our purposes, we're mostly going to be dealing with covalent substances, so in that case, I is going to be 1. C is the molarity, the strength, measured in M, molarity. That's a horrible M. R is the ideal gas constant, which is given to you on the formula sheet. And then T is the temperature in Kelvin. Solute potential is always negative unless it's distilled water. If it's distilled water, the Ys is 0 because C is equal to 0, and then this whole equation goes to 0. Now, the pressure potential can be positive or negative. A pulling force or suction creates a negative pressure potential, and a pushing force creates a positive pressure potential. That as the idea is key. The idea that a pulling force creates a negative pressure potential, and a pulling force creates a positive pressure potential. Now you add these two up, and then that gives your water potential. We will do many more water potential problems Tuesday during the review. Now just for you let's say we have two sides separated by a semipermeable membrane. This side has a -4 pressure potential, and this side has a -6 pressure potential. Water has to move from high water potential to low water potential. -4 is a bigger number than -6. So in this case, the water is going to move this way. And it's going to move that way until the pressure potential, until the water potentials are equal on both sides of the semipermeable membrane. Now the question is, how does this relate to transpiration? And that's what we're about to see. So starting from the beginning, water starts off in the soil, and it is the job of the roots to absorb the water from the soil and bring it to the xylem in the stem. We're not going to go through, there's a much more sort of complicated part of this process, which we're not going to go through. But one thing to keep in mind, because this is a huge idea, is that roots have root hairs, which increase the surface area and not only do they increase the surface area, but they increase the surface area to volume ratio, which remember, that's important to be large. Remember, for transport to occur more efficiently, you want a large surface area to volume ratio. And water, because of this surface area to volume ratio, large one created by the root hairs, water is able to be absorbed into the plant through the roots. Some water is able to diffuse to the membrane, because it's small, but remember, water is also polar. So there are also transport proteins, which we've discussed before, called aquaporins, which also aid in getting the water into the plant, or into the roots. So here we see the aquaporins. That purple protein is the aquaporins, and here we see the root hairs here, increasing the absorption ability of the roots. Now that water is in the xylem, we need to fight gravity. I mean, we're fighting a pretty huge force there, and get the water to the leaves. This process is known as bulk flow. Okay, and bulk flow is whenever you move substances using pressure. Okay, and the question is, where is this pressure created from? Who creates this pressure that allows water to travel up the xylem against gravity? This sentence here probably doesn't mean much sense yet, but we're going to go through this sentence. What allows water to fight gravity and travel up the stem, or through the xylem, is that water is lost through the holes in the leaves called stomata, and the process of water evaporating from the stomata is called transpiration. As water is evaporating, this creates a negative pressure, okay, that allows water to be pulled up the stem. So, now we're going to look at this in a sort of, that's like the overall summary. We're going to look at this in stepwise. So, if we take a look, this is a picture of a leaf, and here is the inside of the leaf where the water is, and then here's the outside of the leaf, and then this hole is obviously the stomata. usually, unless it's really humid outside, and we'll talk about that Monday, the water, there's more water inside the sort of airspace than there is outside the plant. So that being said, there is a high water potential here, because there's lots of water, and a low water potential here. So because of that, water evaporates or exits the plant through the stomata, moving from an area of high water potential, where there's a lot of water, to the dry air, where there's a low water potential. This vaporization of water creates a negative pressure. And remember, a negative pressure, or a pulling force, which is what this water evaporating is, makes the water potential more negative. Now, how does that help water get pulled up the stem? To understand that, let's look at this picture here. This is a cross-section of a leaf. What we just discussed is here, a high water potential here, and a low water potential here. So the water travels out of the stomata. But while it's traveling out of the stomata, it's creating a pulling force, which is lowering the water potential here. And that pulling force, remember, which creates a negative water potential, allows the water to be pulled from the xylem, where there's lots of water in the xylem, to the airspace in the stomata, where a negative pressure potential has been created by the pulling. So there's an even higher water potential here, and then the negative pressure of this being pulled out of the stomata creates a negative potential here, and that allows the water to be pulled out of the xylem into the airspace. And then the process will continue. This will be pulled this way, and the process will continue, and this pulling force travels through the entire xylem of the plant. So this is the huge summary slide of transpiration. We take a look at, this is a tree. Remember, we're trying to get water from the roots all the way up to the top leaves of the tree. If you take a look at the water potential gradient that's here, as you go up the tree, the water potential gets lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. That allows water to travel from high water potential to low water potential. But what creates this gradient, or what maintains this gradient, is the negative pressure generated by water being lost from the leaves by transpiration. That process of water evaporating from the leaves maintains this gradient and allows water to continue to travel from high water potential to low water potential in the leaves. Without the evaporation from water from the leaves, or without transpiration, this process would stop, and this gradient would break down. And then water would never be able to travel or fight gravity all the way from the roots to the leaves, and then photosynthesis would stop. So it's important that transpiration allows for water traveling through the plant. And again, this water is being pulled up the plant by the negative pressure created by transpiration. This is helped also by the structure of water and the structure of xylem. We talked about the hydrogen bonding in water. The fact that water molecules cohere to each other allows, if one molecule is pulled up by this negative pressure, all the other water molecules follow. It's kind of sort of like a tug of war. One pulls, everyone else gets pulled along with it. Secondly, with the xylem, water can also adhere to the xylem, which prevents it from falling down as it's fighting the force of gravity. So both cohesion and adhesion prevent water, or help water fight gravity. Secondly, the structure of xylem also helps pull water up the stem. The xylem is composed of dead, empty cells. As a result, water does not have to pass through aquaporins. It does not have to pass through the cell membrane. The xylem is a continuous tube of dead cells. As a result, there's no sort of semi-permeable fighting that the water has to go through. It just can just very easily travel through the cells without having to go through the phospholipids. Lastly, water can also adhere to the walls of the xylem because of the chemical makeup of the xylem. Hydrogen bonding is possible, and that allows water to not fall down as it's fighting